Hello there. Welcome into a Thursday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the widely available and 100% free Extra Sports 1300 app, a veritable cornucopia of sports topics coming your way over the course of the next 3 hours, and I'd love to get your take on them. The text and phone line is the same for your convenience. 719-247-1313. Let's start with the Broncos, shall we? A little bit of news today on day 2 of training camp. And this has been, all told, a difficult offseason for the Denver Broncos. A necessary offseason, but a difficult one, right? Eating the Russell Wilson contract, releasing Justin Simmons. It was a bit painful if you're a Broncos fan. Again, necessary, but painful. And after that bloodletting that went on during the offseason, the Denver Broncos have seemed to make a point of taking the easy wins. Right? Had to make some difficult decisions. You didn't feel great about them. Didn't make you feel great about the direction that this team was going, perhaps. But after that, there's been some good Broncos news, right? Quinn Meinertz's extension. And now you get Courtland Sutton, who will get the money that he desired all along, but with one caveat, he's going to have to earn it. Reports today that, and really confirmed by Sean Payton, that the Broncos have worked out a deal with Courtland Sutton. Essentially, what this will mean is that if he hits the new incentives that are in his contract for this season, he will earn about $1.5 million more than he was scheduled to make. That's even more of a good deal for the Denver Broncos, in my opinion, because you're not even just handing him the money. Now, we don't know what the incentives are, and Sean Payton said that he wasn't really involved in these negotiations. But if you're going to give him more money and you can turn it into incentives that he has to reach in order to earn it, then I don't see the downside for the Denver Broncos at all. And they had the leverage in this. Courtland Sutton didn't have leverage. He's not Brandon Ayuk. He's not CeeDee Lamb. And the ask he was making was commensurate with the level of player that he is. He just wanted a little bit of a bump, given that he was one of the lone bright spots in a otherwise difficult season. I didn't think he had the leverage. And whatever leverage he did have, he's essentially giving it away by showing up to the mandatory parts of the offseason. But it sends a signal, right? There, you think about the John Elway era with the Denver Broncos, and the most famous thing that John Elway did after, of course, landing Peyton Manning was asking him to take a pay cut. Right? John Elway was a bit ruthless in his negotiation. He felt like you should want to be a part of this Broncos organization. We shouldn't have to chase you. We shouldn't have to pay top dollar. And you could quarrel with that idea, but just know that that's how John Elway operated. So that's all well and good when you're winning. When you're not winning, then you don't have that ability to tell people, hey, this is what we're going to pay. So you've seen when George Paton's taken over that the guys that they feel pretty good about, they've taken care of, to kind of send a signal that, hey, we're not going to be, we understand where we are. And if you do well for us, or if you could bring value to us, we understand that we have to still outbid other teams for your services. And you've seen some of that go on. And while Courtland Sutton is not a player that certainly the Broncos are taking care of to the level that they took care of Quinn Meinerz, it's still a little bit of a nod to this, like, hey, if you do well for us, even though we're not in a place where we're winning a lot and you're not creating a ton of value, we'll give you a little something. And for Courtland Sutton, it's $1.5 million in incentives. I don't think Sean Payton would lose any sleep if Courtland Sutton was not a member of the Denver Broncos. But all things being equal, given the state of affairs with the wide receiver room and given the fact that they're starting a rookie quarterback, I think Sean Payton would just as soon keep Courtland Sutton happy and around.
It's good to have him back out here. He provides leadership as well as a skill set that we like.
And his skill set is really tied to his greatest attribute. Right? His greatest attribute is his size, but more than anybody else on this Broncos roster, he has been able to combine that size with a decent amount of skill to become a productive player. And there is a theme with this Broncos wide receiving room, even with the drafting of Troy Franklin, it just continuing. They have currently 12 receivers on the roster. Only four of them are 6'1" or shorter, and you can already identify a couple of those guys that aren't going to be around. Right? They're on the fringes of the roster, but they go out and they bring in Josh Reynolds, who's 6'3". They draft Troy Franklin, who's a tweener, 6'2", 6'3", somewhere in there, depending on what source you believe. On the Broncos roster, he's listed at 6'3". Courtland Sutton, along with Tim Patrick, the tallest of them all at 6'4". So there's a certain look that Sean Payton wants his wide receiver room to have, and it is not a coincidental look.
Just as we talked about the running back room, that position group is going to be interesting as you guys look at it, and try to put together and piece together. It's a big group, size-wise, and first year I ever coached in the NFL in 1997, I believe, in Philadelphia. We played the 49ers. I want to say it's 97. Could have been 98. But it was at the old Veterans Stadium, and I remember when the Niners receivers walked out, and it was Jerry Rice, and it was John Taylor, and it was Stokes, and I couldn't get over how they looked. And there is a prototype. That doesn't mean that they can't be smaller, then they have a different skill set. But in this league, that's what we're looking for, and this is a big group.
And I think the biggest part of that is the red zone. Right? So much of the NFL now is, it's always been important to score in the red zone, but that's what it is. You want those big targets to be able to find them, be able to elevate in the end zone to make these grabs, and that's what Courtland Sutton did 10 times last year. was use his size to be able to high point the ball and bring it down for a touchdown. But with the amount of size that this Broncos wide receiving core has, also kind of points to the fact that, Courtland Sutton may not be long for this team. He may not be. This change in his contract is only for this year. They're not tacking on years. They're not doing anything beyond this year, and they could get out of his contract basically free and clear if they wanted to after this season. Now, there's less incentive to do that because, again, he was productive. But they draft Troy Franklin for a reason. Right? They wanted Tim Patrick back for a reason. They want to have some options. They want to have that size. And if a couple of these guys emerge, and as the Broncos look to distribute their assets to other places as they continue to rebuild this roster, I'm not saying it's a foregone conclusion that Courtland Sutton's not going to be around long term, but they have that flexibility. And it does show you that they don't look at Courtland Sutton and say, oh, we have to have this guy. We're fine with rewarding him as long as he earns it. But we got some guys that we think may be able to do kind of the same things that Courtland Sutton does. And time will tell if they do. If they don't, then Courtland Sutton's going to stick around for a while. Still young. What you can say for Courtland Sutton this year is that he's the one guy that you know what you can get. Right? Marvin Mims, what's he going to be in year 2? Troy Franklin's a rookie. Maybe some of the guys like Lil Jordan Humphrey and some of these others, you think you know what you have, but you know that probably they're not capable of taking on a role like Courtland Sutton. Tim Patrick coming off of multiple surgeries. And then you bring in Josh Reynolds and you feel like Josh Reynolds can do some of those same things and you bring him in for a reason, but you never quite know how someone's going to be with the change of scenery. So with Courtland Sutton, he's the most predictable of all the wide receivers on the Broncos roster, I would say. The most predictable going into 2024. You know what you're going to get. You get about 60 catches, 800 yards, give or take. Maybe the 10 touchdowns was probably too many. He's probably not that guy on a consistent basis. We know why he was able to get 10, that Russell Wilson was looking for him all the time. But 6, 7 touchdowns feels like the sweet spot. You can take that. Take that at a relatively low dollar amount for a pass catcher. The Broncos last year, despite Courtland Sutton and his heroics in many games last year, still 20th ranked red zone team last year. Despite being top 10 in the number of trips they made to the red zone. So what does that say? Do the Broncos need to get Courtland Sutton the ball more? No, actually quite the opposite. They need to have more guys in that area of the field that they can rely on. So that doesn't bode well for Courtland Sutton to build upon to be better, perhaps, than he was last year. So it all points to this being for 2024. And then beyond that, who knows? But many players on the Denver Broncos are in that same boat. Last year, Sean Payton did most of the work in this area, but he's still doing it. You notice when a proven winner comes in and evaluates what you are. You know, we may have some view of what this Broncos team is, the players on this team, it varies. But here's a guy that has done it before, and he's coming in, and the moves that he makes, what this team does, everything, the draft, trades, free agent signings, contract extensions, contract amendments in Cortland Sutton's case, they point to what Sean Payton thinks the Broncos need, what he's prioritizing. And he's also telling you, you may think that Cortland Sutton is this. I think he's a guy that I'm willing to give incentives to, but not willing to commit to long term. All of these deals that Sean Payton is making, all of these draft picks, everything is telling you what he thinks of this Broncos roster. And only amending Cortland Sutton's contract for one season tells you that this is a guy that while he likes him, he doesn't like him. He's not in love with him. And we'll see what those incentives are and if Cortland Sutton can reach them. And if he, maybe they base it on what they think he needs to become in order to remain on this Denver Broncos team long term. So we'll see. But not that this was ever going to get to a level of Brandon Ayuk or CeeDee Lamb, but again, an easy win for the Denver Broncos, especially given that Cortland Sutton's going to have to earn his higher salary. 719-247-1313, just getting going on this Thursday edition of the show. Coming up next, we stick with the NFL, but head to Cowboys camp. Many people wondering how what the Cowboys did this offseason could be construed as going all in, which Jerry Jones kept repeating. He repeated again today, but at least he explained what that means. And you'll hear from him next on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. The most curious team, I think, in the NFL this offseason was the Dallas Cowboys. And the reason is really because of Jerry Jones. Because Jerry Jones said, we're all in. Which, in the world of sports, has a certain connotation to it. And then the Dallas Cowboys went out and did nothing. I don't mean like, oh, relatively, they didn't do anything. They didn't do much. No, they did nothing. They didn't extend Dak. They didn't extend Parsons. They didn't extend Lamb. They didn't go out and get anybody. They lost Tony Pollard. They did nothing. And given what I thought we all agreed upon was the meaning of all in, being you will spare no expense, you will stop at nothing to make sure that this is the year you win a Super Bowl. Sure didn't seem like the Dallas Cowboys were all in. Here's Jerry Jones today explaining what exactly all in means.
I'm all in. I'm all in. Sometimes being all in means you narrow. You remove the months out here that are in the future. And you narrow it down to where all we're talking about is right now and the next playoff season. And that's it for everybody. We're all in. We're all in. It's all right there. Let's okay. We all got some things out here in the future, another 2 or 3 years on contracts, all that stuff. Let's all get in here. Zero right now in this. Dak's got his year. Contract. Let's focus right here. We all got a lot on the line for that playoff game. A lot of it. So you got to understand a weird way of looking at it a little bit with that.
I would say that what Jerry Jones is describing there is closer to hedging his bets than going all in, if I can keep with the gambling references. Doesn't what he's saying seem like the Dallas Cowboys are hedging their bets? It's actually a more conservative way of going about things than what we would typically expect all in to me. What Jerry Jones is saying is that I'm tired of paying all of these guys all of this money only to get embarrassed in the postseason. So you're going to have to do it on your own. Which, not saying across the board, but just in general, don't you kind of understand where Jerry Jones is coming from? Forget whether he is accurately defining what all in means. Just you look at this Dallas Cowboys team. Do you think that they are one piece away from winning a Super Bowl? Do you think that Dak Prescott is going to be the next Super Bowl winning quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys? Now, I think Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb certainly have a future. The only reason I would think Dak Prescott has a future in Dallas is because of what we've been talking about all week when it comes to paying quarterbacks. The alternative is so much worse. Right? This isn't a vote of confidence. that he's putting in this team. It's quite the opposite. But I think you would agree with that. That this Dallas Cowboys team, as currently constructed, whether it be with Mike McCarthy, with Dak Prescott, with some of these other players, they've gone about as far as they're going to go. But the issue with that is that by providing them nothing, by only losing players and not gaining any players, and upsetting your franchise wide receiver and maybe upsetting your franchise pass rusher, it's far less likely than that you will win than it was. I don't think his tactic is going to pay off. I don't think CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, Dak Prescott, Mike McCarthy, and the rest of the Dallas Cowboys are suddenly going to take this as, well, we got to improve, and they're going to come together, rally, and win a Super Bowl here. So I understand what Jerry Jones is saying here. Like, I've poured money into this team, and I'm getting the same results. I'm not doing that anymore. But that's not going to bring Dallas a championship. And that's not what all in means. All in means you believe in the group you have. And no matter how many times Jerry Jones says it, his actions speak louder and say he doesn't believe in the group that he has. He doesn't believe that the Dallas Cowboys, after the embarrassment they went through at the hands of Green Bay, that this group is currently constructed is going to win a Super Bowl. Now, the problem is, again, especially in the case of Dak Prescott, they can replace Mike McCarthy. Right? That's easy. Replacing Dak Prescott, even with his shortcomings, is far more difficult. So I can kind of see where Jerry Jones is, where he's coming from. And I understand that he wants to try and turn this into a positive thing. But he's telling you that he agrees with your assessment of this football team. Dak Prescott is not good enough to win a Super Bowl. Mike McCarthy is not, even though he's won a Super Bowl, is not a good enough coach to get this team to a Super Bowl. They're not good enough. And there's no reason to think that they're going to be any better this year. So everything that Jerry Jones tries to do, window dressing and all this other stuff, I mean, it does sound like he's being a little hypocritical, right? I'm all in, but I'm not going to invest anything. I'm not going to the window and buying more chips. What I have is what I have. That's not what we equate all in with in sports. Running it back, but that would sound weird given the way that their season ended, but that's essentially what the Cowboys are doing. They're running it back, and Jerry Jones is saying, you got to show me more. The problem is, I don't see how they do. I don't see how much better Dak Prescott can be. I don't see how much better Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb can be. And there are a couple of those players that if I'm a Cowboys fan, I absolutely want to keep long term. He's just trying to set the tone throughout the team. It's not going to work. And that's the most important thing here. Right? He could call it whatever he wants. He can try to spin it whatever way he wants. It's not going to work. And there are plenty of people like me who have been burned by this football team thinking that they could take another step forward, and they haven't. And there's no reason to think they will with no reinforcements joining them this offseason. So here's my prediction as of July 25th. Dallas Cowboys win double-digit games. I would probably take Philly to win that division, but Dallas is going to win enough because Washington, I like where they're going, but they're not going to be there year one. And the Giants are a mess. So they're going to win enough games in their division. We know we've seen enough of Dak Prescott. We've seen enough of this Dallas Cowboys team. They are going to pummel bad teams, and there are more of them in the NFC than the AFC. They're going to pummel the bad teams. They're going to build up their win total. They're going to get into the playoffs, but they're not San Francisco. They're not Green Bay. They're not Detroit. They're not Philadelphia. They're going to crash and burn, or maybe they just flat out lose. Maybe it doesn't have to be embarrassing, but they're not going to get to where Jerry Jones wants them to go. And then they start figuring out how they can extricate themselves from the Dak Prescott contract. The Broncos set the tone for everybody. Don't worry about dead cap. Do what you got to do. And my confidence is not high that they can find, because they're going to be too good while not being good enough. It's a very difficult place to be, but that's where the Dallas Cowboys are. So this idea that somehow they end up with Shedeur Sanders or a top quarterback, I don't see it. Do you turn to Trey Lance? Have you seen anything from him? But I don't know. They just let Dak walk away, and without a concession plan, I don't think they will, because what Jerry Jones wants more than anything else is for the Cowboys to be relevant. And I don't think he can bear the thought of the Cowboys being irrelevant. And if they simply let Dak Prescott go, that's where they're heading. Even if they extend CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons, which I would guess that they would. They're in a spot that a few NFL teams are, which is just, they're good. They're just not good enough. And the only real way out of it in a salary cap league is to tear it down. I don't know if Jerry Jones has the stomach to do that. It's not a good situation in Dallas. And also, having heard his explanation, that is definitely not what all-in means. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on what all-in means. Coming up next, we got a site in Major League Baseball that is growing more and more rare by the day. Seven one nine 247 1313 is the text and phone line if you want to interact today. Tucker does. Few of you do. Well, let's start with Tucker. Ryan, you don't know until the season is over about any of these teams. They didn't lose anyone of significance. Defensively, they folded up like a $2 suitcase last year. I would counter that by saying Tony Pollard is a player of significance that they lost. But the fact of the matter is, there's nothing on this roster with the Dallas Cowboys that makes you feel like they're capable of a jump. CeeDee Lamb's already, he came off a career year last year. Micah Parsons has been a terrific defensive player. Who on this Dallas Cowboys roster is going to step forward and make the difference for this team? What's Mike McCarthy going to do differently? What is Dak Prescott going to do differently? That's the problem with Jerry Jones saying they're going all in and then not adding anything to the kitty here. Who on this roster is going to step up? I know that's what he thinks he's doing. He thinks he's inspiring this team. Even though the impetus of this is, I'm tired of spending money on this team when they embarrass me on their way out of the playoffs. But he thinks publicly he's spinning it in a way that is inspiring to his team. No, he's just tired of seeing them lose, and he doesn't know the way out. That's the thing. The Cowboys don't know their way out of this. Can you really lose Dak Prescott for nothing? You really willing to lose CeeDee Lamb or Micah Parsons to completely tear this thing down? I don't think they're willing to do that. It's not going to work. That's the point. So something happened this afternoon that, given the way the game is going, I think that we should treasure a little bit more. Here's KWFN on the call.
He's got it and the ball game is over. Dylan Cease says no hit the Washington Nationals. On a rainy Thursday in D.C., the Padres will celebrate. They have mobbed Cease on the infield, and the Pods sweep the Nats with a 3-0 victory.
Again, KWFN Padres radio on the call. Dylan Cease threw a no-hitter. Yes, Dylan Cease singularly by himself lasted 9 innings and did not concede a hit. A feat that is growing, or I should say dwindling. I was going to say growing or scarce, but it's dwindling. Went back and looked. And look, there's not, some years we get a little bit of a bump. Sometimes it's down. But I think this is a pretty telling stat here. Okay, in 2021, there were 7 complete game no-hitters. True no-hitters. You can put what the Astros have done, what these other teams do, where they use 4 or 5 pitchers, put that in a different category. It's still an accomplishment. It's just not what Dylan Cease did today. 7 complete game no-hitters in 2021. Since then, 2 today with Dylan Cease, 6. 3 seasons of baseball, 2 3/4 or wherever we're at right now in the MLB season. We have 6. Now, the number of total no-hitters is, a little bit more level, but again, it's boosted the last couple of years by these combined no-hitters. And no-hitters are a little bit, because they are a little fluky by nature. Like, you think of how big a baseball field is. You don't get one bloop hit. You don't get one swinging bunt. So it's kind of a fluky thing in a way. I'm not trying to take away from Dylan Cease at all. But it's not like, home runs or strikeouts or runs or something that you expect to see every game and kind of measuring where that is going. But still, you can see that there's been kind of a precipitous drop in the number of complete game no-hitters we have had. And you also know the culprit, right? More than anything else, Paul Skeens is a fantastic example. These pitchers aren't allowed to pursue it. Dylan Cease threw 114 pitches. Derek Shelton would be fired on the spot if he let Paul Skeens throw 114 pitches in a game. And I know Skeens is an extreme case, or kind of a different case because of where he is at in his career and everything. But this thought kind of permeates throughout baseball, no? Cease allowed to throw 114 pitches. And an accomplishment that is quite rare anyway has become more rare. So does that mean we value it more? I think so. I think when these moments come around where a pitcher can go start to finish, it's almost more impressive that the Padres manager allowed Dylan Cease, despite all baseball rhyme and reason these days. At least it seems like it's baseball's rhyme and reason these days. Allowed him to finish. That's more impressive. That's more shocking than the fact that Dylan Cease threw a no-hitter. But almost 3 full seasons combined, we have not had the number of complete game no-hitters that we did in 2021. And I think this is a trend that's going to continue for a while. And look at some of the other stuff, that direction that baseball has gone because of sabermetrics. The only thing that brings them back are rule changes. I mean, think about it with what Billy Beane and the A's did with Moneyball, right? Brought forth the era of the 3 outcome at bat. Hit a home run, strike out, walk. And at least getting on base was still valued. But it brought forth, all this other stuff like launch angle and exit velo and all this kind of stuff, that basically you had a bunch of players that would constantly swing for the fences. And the only way they'd actually get a base is if the pitches weren't near the strike zone. The goal was actually not to get on base as time went on. It was almost like the walk was the least desired outcome, because in some of those at-bats, guys wouldn't even be swinging, and you want these guys to be swinging these big uppercut swings trying to hit home runs. So baseball, I think the rule change that has brought baseball a little bit back towards the center is moving the bases closer together. Right? Now it's easier to steal bases. And if it's easier to steal bases, then it's better to get guys on base. So now it's okay that there are players that don't swing for the fences as much. I mean, don't get me wrong. They still very much do, but there are some guys that are valued in baseball today that don't hit a ton of home runs and they get on base. And then they, like Ellie De La Cruz. Right? He gets on base and he immediately tries to steal second. More often than not, tries to steal third. But that's a rule change. That's a manipulation in order to try and pry these teams away from the 3 outcome at bat, inviting them to get more guys that get on base, to play baseball in a more the way that we grew up watching baseball, right? Manufacturing runs and everything like that. So I don't know what's going to bring this aspect of the game back. Right? Forget the no-hitters and the perfect games. Just allowing pitchers to finish what they start more. Right? I heard something the other day, someone just throw this out, some kind of incentive for keeping guys in later in the game. I don't know, making the new eligibility for a win 6 innings instead of 5. I don't know how you incentivize teams to go away from what they're doing because they seem pretty dead set on it. They don't want these starters going deep into games. They'd much rather have a combined no-hitter than one player going the distance. So I expect this trend to continue. Unless Derek Shelton lets Paul Skeens go deep into the game, and then maybe we'll see a few more no-hitters. But I think it's going to remain pretty rare. Maybe even more rare than it has been throughout the course of baseball history. But good on Dylan Cease, first and foremost, but also good on his manager. Although 114 pitches to get through 9 innings, that's not stretching it too much. We've had some no-hitters where guys were well over 120. That would never happen. So Cease was a little bit more judicious with his pitches today. But don't think we're going to see many of these because if you look, runs are down. Pitchers are winning, right? They're taking back baseball. Runs are down. Home runs are down. All of these offensive numbers are down. Part of that reason is because while not everyone is going the Tampa Bay Rays route and saying we're just going to bring in a reliever every couple of innings, but teams are going to their bullpen earlier. And the numbers are saying it's working. The way they're going about it, even though we have all these injuries and stuff because these guys are throwing so hard, maxing out over the course of a shorter period of time, what they're doing is working. Just like all the Moneyball stuff. It worked. Now, not to the tune of the A's winning a world title, but other teams copied them, Boston Red Sox, and ended up winning. So unless you do something with the game that forces them to come back the other way, they're going to keep up with it because the numbers are telling them it's working. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, now that Quinn Meinerz has got a new deal, now that Cortland Sutton's contract matter is resolved, who's next for the Denver Broncos, if anyone? Welcome in, Drive Time Sports. Ryan Kaufman with you on this Thursday. Reminder, you can watch the show live on a daily basis. As long as you follow us on social media, it really doesn't matter the platform. Suppose TikTok and Truth Social do elude us at this current moment in time, but Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube, we're there. Every day that I'm in studio at Extra Sports 1300 if you'd like to follow along with the show that way. The news of the day is that Cortland Sutton gets a raise, but the Broncos are making him earn it. It is $1.5 million in incentives that they have added to his contract. So he's going to, if he hits those incentives, get up to $15 million a year. So that contract, and I'll say disagreement because dispute sounds too harsh. This never got contentious. Cortland Sutton showed up, said he would show up. Didn't get ugly whatsoever. Didn't even threaten to get ugly. But now that it's done, the question is, who's next? Garrett Bowles would be the most immediate one, given that he is in a walk year. But I think the Broncos are okay with letting him go. I think they are. If he can go out onto the open market and get a lucrative deal, good on him. I think they're willing to see him test the market, see what he comes back with. And I think the reason is twofold. I think, one, there's a question of whether Garrett Bowles fits into the mold of what Sean Payton wants. I think Sean Payton is willing to sacrifice a little bit of strength and size for a little bit more football IQ, maybe a little bit of quickness, a lineman who's a little bit more nimble. So I don't know that Garrett Bowles, the fit, it's not about how good of a left tackle Garrett Bowles is. It's actually why I think Garrett Bowles can get a pretty lucrative deal if he were to hit the open market. But there's a difference between quality of player and fit. I don't know if he's a fit on Sean Payton's offensive line, as good as he might be. But I think that's the one you look at that probably needs to be done if they're going to do something, or else he's going to hit free agency. The next financial item on the list for many people would be Pat Surtain. They picked up his fifth-year option. He's not going to walk after this year, so there's time. But I think a lot of people are looking at Pat Surtain and saying, when's that going to get done? You got to lock up Pat Surtain, right? He's your best player. He's a lockdown corner. Sean Payton said yesterday that the team would like to get a deal done. They'd like to. Don't have to. Wouldn't love to. They'd like to. But added, more importantly, we will get to it when we want to. That's the key phrase that Sean Payton threw out. We'll get to it when we want to. Because the question becomes, it's not that Pat Surtain needs to prove anything as a player. He's arguably the best at what he does and has been that from about the minute he stepped onto an NFL field. That's not what they're waiting for. Here's where I think the timeline is in the decision-making process with the Denver Broncos is. I mentioned this earlier when it comes to Courtland Sutton, but I think it applies to everybody. Look at what Sean Payton is doing as he's trying to rebuild this roster. Look at what he's focusing on. Look at who he's extending. Look at who he's drafting. Quarterback, pass rusher, pass catcher, first three picks in this draft. All three more important positions than corner. And a draft that's safe to assume he had more say in than last year's. This was really Sean Payton's draft this year. Quarterback, pass rusher, pass catcher. First three picks. His first two signings when he arrived in Denver were offensive linemen. The first significant extension the Broncos handed out was to an offensive lineman. Defensive back is down on the list. It's not that far down. It's not a safety. It's not a kicker. It's not a punter. It's important. It's probably the next one on the list behind pass thrower, pass catcher, and pass rusher. But it's not above any of those three, and you clearly see Sean Payton, with the help of George Payton, prioritizing those positions first and foremost. I think you can get by in this league without a lockdown corner. I don't like to make comparisons to Kansas City or any champion, especially a dynastic one in any sport, because it's kind of hard to look at what they do and say, oh, we can do that, because they can't. But because it's fresh in my mind, they just let L'Jarius Sneed go. He's not as good as Pat Surtain. I'm not saying that. But to the Kansas City Chiefs, he's their best corner. And is the closest thing to a lockdown corner that they have. And they let him go because of what they did in the secondary with other players. Their bet is, as a group, with spreading the wealth, so to speak, they can be just as good of a secondary as they are with L'Jarius Sneed, who's a borderline elite corner in this league. None of this is about not wanting Patrick Surtain. It's understanding that the Denver Broncos have a ways to go. And they need help in a lot of areas. And do they want to tie up top of market value money on Pat Surtain? Or would he be better suited getting that kind of a deal with a team that's closer to winning than the Denver Broncos are at? Of course, all of this depends on Bo Nix. It does. Because if Bo Nix hits, and whatever, we all make our own vision of what that looks like. But whatever it is for Sean Payton, if he sees it, then I think that actually increases the likelihood that Pat Surtain is in Denver long term. Because the way you have to look at it is, when the Denver Broncos are back to being a winning football team, like playoffs, maybe pushing to go further, who's going to be on this roster? Who can you see being on this roster and being productive and helping do that? And that's what you saw. Justin Simmons is a great example of this. Right now, he's one of the best at his position. Right? But it hasn't gotten the Broncos very far. And if the Broncos, let's say, are 3 years away from being the team that Sean Payton wants them to be, is Justin Simmons going to be an elite safety at that 3 years from now? Garrett Bowles, Cortland Sutton, they could be in this kind of consideration right now. Like right now, you would say they're the best at their position on the Denver Broncos. But if they invest the type of money that the two of them would require, is that going to keep them from improving other areas? But it starts with Bo Nix. If Bo Nix shows Sean Payton what he wants to see, then he'll believe that the Denver Broncos are not that far off. And then you would obviously want to extend Pat Surtain and pay him top of the line, because you're going to be a winning team. But if Bo Nix doesn't show that, then either it means you got to move off of Bo Nix, potentially, or you got to invest even more in other positions to help prop up Bo Nix. Right now, Pat Surtain's value to the Denver Broncos is more that of a trade chip than it is a difference maker. And just look at what the Broncos have been since Pat Surtain has come into the league. Where has having one of the best corners in the NFL gotten him? Nowhere. Got him nowhere. They needed offensive line help. They needed a quarterback. They need weapons. And if they can do that, if they have the answers in-house to those positions, then the next guy up on the list is Pat Surtain and keeping him. But if the Broncos seem further away after this season than Sean Payton thinks they'll be, then you got to think long and hard about not the fact that Pat Surtain isn't good, but it's asset allocation. Can you use him to get more draft picks, to prioritize another position? I think that's what Sean Payton is referring to, says we'll get to it when we want to. And when they want to is when they know that this Oregon quarterback is who they think that he is. And that can even be possible if this team wins 4 or 5 games, mind you. It can. They can lose games, and you can see Bo Nix progressing as a quarterback. Ideally, you'd win a couple more than that. But everything with this Broncos team stems from Bo Nix and what he is this season. Either making sure that he's protected by extending Quinn Meinerz, making sure that the best wide receiver currently on the roster is happy, but also not extending players that you don't know are going to be at the height of their powers or worth that money when you're good again. And while, the play of Justin Fields hasn't vindicated me by any stretch of the imagination, it was exactly what I was arguing back on that draft night. Not that Pat Surtain's not a better corner than Justin Fields is a quarterback. Not that Pat Surtain is a better player. That's not what I was arguing. I was arguing about priorities. Clearly, the Broncos felt like Justin Fields wasn't going to be any good. And at this point, they're not completely wrong, right? There's still time. But the idea is you're not going to win in the NFL if your best players are a safety and a corner. And that's what it's been for the Denver Broncos. If this team, more specifically of Bo Nix, shows Sean Payton when he needs to show him to believe that he did indeed find his guy, then watch the Denver Broncos go on a spending spree, extend Pat Surtain out, give him top of market money, go out and splash the cash potentially for a Brandon Ayuk. But they got to see that first. And Pat Surtain's not going to do anything to make Bo Nix better. 719-247-1313. Time is not completely on the Broncos side on this, but they do have time. One of those fun mechanisms that is in the collective bargaining agreement, this 5th-year option stuff. And then franchise tag as well. So I don't think that the Broncos feel rushed at all to get Pat Surtain's deal done, as much as Broncos fans would at least like to have that guy that they know is good locked up long term. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, you'll hear from Javonte Williams. Does he sound leaner? That's my main question. But then we'll talk about the Broncos more seriously, their running back room, and one of the new additions and why Sean Payton likes him so much. Celebrate Christmas in July with the Colorado Springs Switchbacks tomorrow night at Widener Field. Be there at 6 as the first 2,000 fans through the gates will get a limited edition Switchback scarf powered by KOAA News 5. And then after the Switchbacks put a whooping on Las Vegas Lights FC, experience a very special Christmas fireworks display. It all goes down tomorrow night, 6 p.m., Widener Field. Get your tickets now at switchbacksfc.com. Getting in the holiday spirit, which if you know anything about me, I'm never in. I'm never in what people call the holiday spirit. It is one of my many deficiencies as a human being, and probably why the only people who want to spend any extended amount of time with me are my children, and I sometimes question that on a daily basis. But this one time I will make an exception, and I will get into the Christmas in July spirit by giving away 4 tickets to tomorrow night's match. Be the 13th texter to text Switchbacks and your name to 719-247-1313. And you'll win 4 tickets to see the Switchbacks take on Las Vegas Lights FC tomorrow night for Christmas in July. No Christmas sweater required, but strongly encouraged. Actually, not strongly encouraged because it might be quite warm. I don't know, maybe wear an elf hat. I can't control what you wear to the game, but I'm just making suggestions. Yesterday, the standout of Broncos camp was Javonte Williams. A little bit more svelte. Javonte Williams. Today, he gave the secret to losing the 11 pounds that he lost.
I think the biggest thing, I just didn't eat after 7 p.m. And I just cut all my snacks out because I like to snack a lot, like Takis and things like that. I cut all that out.
So, basically, we're gremlins. That's what I've come to learn. We are gremlins. You should not feed us after a certain time of evening. And the time keeps moving back. You ever notice that? So with the gremlins, or the mogwai, to be more specific, with the mogwai, don't feed them after midnight, because then they'll turn into gremlins. For humans, I thought it was don't feed us after 8 p.m. because then we will turn into more round gremlins. Now Javonte Williams is saying 7 o'clock. So, science, what are you doing? Can we get a ruling here? What time am I supposed to stop eating? Because I'm going to take it to 59, baby. You tell me I need to be done eating at 8 o'clock. At 7:59, I'm finishing that sandwich. If it's 7 o'clock, fine. It will be 6:59. Or you just take Ozempic. That's the other option here, but that's not what Javonte Williams did. He decided to cut out the Takis, which not easy to do. Not easy to do. Now, of course, the impetus of him losing weight was Sean Payton. Sean Payton, because everything is orchestrated with this guy. Everything is intentional. Just for some strange reason, by pure happenstance, Javonte Williams happened to walk into the draft room while Sean Payton had North Carolina film on. And he talked to Javonte Williams and said, "That's the running back I want." amazing that Javonte Williams would have never lost that weight had it not been for that chance meeting with Sean Payton in the draft room. And it is not suspicious at all that Sean Payton just happened to turn on North Carolina film. Sure, all of this was just a happy coincidence. But Javonte Williams did say that conversation with Sean Payton is a big reason why he is the leaner man you see today.
The type of coach Coach Payton is, I mean, he's seen a lot of great running backs come through. So anything he say, I'm gonna listen to it, and just for him to even care and just to tell me this is what I want you to be when you come back, have the best chance to do what you got to do. So that just by itself showed me that he cared, and if he put that much effort into it, I will too.
Yeah, I would say if the guy puts in the effort to turn on your college film and orchestrate this whole chance meeting at the Broncos team facility, then what's cutting out a few talkies? Really, the key to the Broncos offense improving in 2024, and maybe the more realistic way, it's not Bo Nix slinging it around. He's still a rookie. He's still going to have the training wheels on for much of this season. The question about this Broncos offense is not, can Bo Nix in year one be more productive than Russell Wilson? Now, it's, can he take fewer sacks? But it's not about Bo Nix topping whatever good Russell Wilson did last year. That's a longer term project here. But if the Broncos want immediate offensive improvement, it's the running game that has to get better, not the passing game, because that's what fooled people into thinking, why are the Broncos cutting Russell Wilson? He was good last year. Well, you know, watching the games, that wasn't exactly the case. Looking at only 2 lines on the box score is not telling the story of Russell Wilson in 2023. But some of those numbers were good. In fact, the Broncos were a top 10 team in passing touchdowns. But yet, they basically averaged what the Rockies scored against the Red Sox yesterday. Why was that? The running game. The running game was completely ineffective. 19th in rushing yards and 28th in rushing touchdowns. This running game has to get better. And yes, it will benefit Bo Nix. Both things can be true. But the biggest area for improvement offensively for the Denver Broncos is not in the pass game, it's in the run game. And the best way for the Denver Broncos to improve is for Javonte Williams to be back to his old self of way back 2 years ago. He's the best back that they have on this roster. So if you start to cobble it together, because it's not just one guy, those days are mostly gone unless your running back is Christian McCaffrey. It's going to be a few guys, right? So if Javonte Williams, let's say he gets back to where he was and with an improved offensive line since he was a 900-yard rusher, I don't think it's out of the question that Javonte Williams, if he stays healthy, can be a 1,000-yard rusher, which is, and I said this the whole time Philip Lindsay was racking up a 1,000-yard season, it's not that difficult to be a 1,000-yard rusher in the NFL. About half the league has 1,000-yard rushers. Okay, so that's not a high bar to set. And Javonte Williams was at 900 just a couple of years ago. But whatever that averages out to a game, what, 60 yards? He got 900 yards by rushing for about 50 yards a game. So let's say he gets up to 60, right? Improvement from the offensive line, a dedication to the run game by Sean Payton. Let's say he gets to 60 yards a game. And then let's say Jaleel McLaughlin gets a little bit higher. He goes from 30-something to 40. If you get, 30 more yards, you're a top 10 rushing team in the NFL. 30 more yards. If Jaleel McLaughlin is a little bit better than he was last year, or maybe it's just a matter of him getting more touches or whatever, if he improved just a little bit and Javonte Williams basically gets back to what he was before the ACL injury, they only need one guy to pick up the rest of the slack and get about 30 yards a game. And now we're talking about a top 10 rush offense in the NFL. Where do those 30 yards come from? Best bet, Audric Estime, rookie out of Notre Dame, who Sean Payton likes very, very much.
The vision was pretty clear. This is a guy, when we did all the studies on him, we took 15-yard runs or more, first in his class, minus runs. How sometimes running backs have runs where they don't, first in his class. Real good vision in the hole. Rarely did you see a player lose yards. He had good feet for someone who was 220 pounds. So I saw runner first and value on when we took him. He was one of those guys that I really like. When the draft started, every once in a while there's a player you'd say, when this thing's all over with, I'd love to have this player. And fortunately, we were able to get this player.
So yeah, Sean Payton likes Audric Estime. But Estime fits what you're seeing in the NFL now when it comes to the new way they handle running backs. He talked about the value. They get him in the 5th round. Right? So he's going to be cheap. He's going to split carries with 2 other running backs. Maybe even 3 to start. I'm very curious to see what Samaje Perine's role is going to be on this team, because I look at Estime and I say that's kind of what Samaje Perine was doing in Denver. But he fits that. And he fits what Sean Payton has done. Right? Eventually, Alvin Kamara became one of those borderline bell cow backs in New Orleans, but that's not what they drafted him to be. That's not even what they thought he was going to be. He talked about it today. Like, they liked Alvin Kamara's catching ability. And he told the story today about a run that he had against Arizona, and then they went, oh, maybe he can run the football. And they started to use him that way. But Sean Payton, until Kamara kind of emerged, was very much kind of in this mode of thinking that we see so many NFL teams be in these days, which is, I'm going to not spend premium draft capital, first and foremost. I'm going to get a few of these guys. I'm going to split the carries, and then eventually I'm going to cast them aside. But that's tomorrow's story. So he fits. Audric Estime is a fit on this football team. And I still think that Troy Franklin might be the most impactful rookie outside of Bo Nix. And of course, his production will be directly tied to Bo Nix. But Estime has a chance to hit with the Denver Broncos. He's not the number 1 running back. He's not even the number 2 running back. But you look at this draft class, and outside of Knicks, it's then Franklin or Estime, and I think both of them have the chance to flash a little bit this year for the Denver Broncos. And they have to. These guys have to hit. This, whether you want to accept it or not, the Broncos are rebuilding. This is a long road they are about to go down. Okay, we can battle, and we will, for days and weeks and months to come on whether this team is a 4-win team or a 6-win team or a 7-win team. But the fact of the matter is they are rebuilding, and rebuilding is a long road unless Bo Nix takes big steps forward. But with a rebuilding team, you got to have many of your draft picks hit, not just your quarterback. That's the most important one. But some of these other guys got to hit too. And you look, and this is not, on Sean Payton, but you look 2 years ago, Benito, Dulcich, Mathis. I think to varying degrees, you are still holding out some hope. Mathis has been a productive player. Benito made some strides from year 1 to year 2. Dulcich has been hurt, but you still think that there's something there with all three of those guys. They drafted 9 guys 2 years ago, and it's down to those 3. You got to have a higher batting average than that. You look at last year's class. J.L. Skinner, not really in the conversation at safety. Riley Moss, maybe he sneaks his way in, but right now he's not, I think, being considered for either of the 2 other corner positions outside of Pat Surtain. And that was a smaller class. And there are a couple of guys. It's like, what is Mims going to be in year 2? And will Alex Forsythe win the center job? If Alex Forsythe doesn't win the center job, then you can scratch him off the list. The teams that successfully rebuild and turn things around in a relatively short amount of time, they don't just hit on the one draft pick. They hit on multiple. I mean, like, really hit. So it can't just be Bo Nix, although that's your preference. I think you got a couple in Troy Franklin and Audric Estime that have a decent chance of doing it. I like those picks by the Denver Broncos. 719-247-1313. That's the number if you'd like to text or call in. Coming up next, I played Jerry Jones audio earlier. He wasn't done speaking. And if I'm going to go back to Jerry Jones, you're going to want to hear what he had to say and who he compared himself to after this on Extra Sports 1300. Shouts to Mark, who won the 4-pack of tickets to tomorrow night's Switchbacks match for Christmas in July. If you did not win and your name is not Mark, but this specific Mark, you could still get tickets, but only a few are left at switchbacksfc.com. Earlier, I played Jerry Jones trying to explain what all in means. If you missed it, here it is.
I'm all in. I'm all in. Sometimes being all in means you narrow. You remove the months out here that are in the future. And you narrow it down to where all we're talking about is right now and the next playoff season. And that's it for everybody. We're all in. We're all in.
Okay. Didn't do a great job of it. Definitely not what we equate to being all in. He should have used different words. I suggested hedging bets. That's kind of what I'm more equated to. But I really should listen to all of what Jerry Jones says, because until he actually walks away from a microphone, you don't want to bail out too early, because at any given moment, he could say something that you're like, whoa. And he did do that. Here's more Jerry Jones today. It gets better. What? No, it doesn't. First of all, Patrick Mahomes does not run the option. I know there's some RPO stuff, but the type of option that Jerry Jones is talking about, Patrick Mahomes does not run. But it really is unfortunate anytime anyone brings up Patrick Mahomes as a comparison to what they are, because you're just automatically going to lose points with that. Right? What the Cowboys are doing. This is what Jerry Jones is saying. What the Cowboys are doing by letting all these players twist in the wind, by giving them no additional pieces to help them win, by basically just saying you got to go out and be better. He's saying that the Dallas Cowboys, he himself, is doing as good of a job with the Dallas Cowboys as Patrick Mahomes is playing quarterback. This is the team. He is the Patrick Mahomes of team building. Is that what Jerry Jones is trying to say here? It gets worse and worse. It gets more convoluted. I want to be sensitive to recent situations, but haven't we discussed people that Like, as a society, people that may not come across coherently when they're speaking. What is this from Jerry Jones? I'll tell you what this is. This is Jerry Jones twisting and turning and doing some level of gymnastics to try and turn what the Dallas Cowboys did, which was arguably have the worst offseason of any team in the NFL, and make you think that this is going to be good. He's gaslighting you. That's essentially what he's gaslighting you, thinking that this is going to be a path forward that will be more conducive to Dallas Cowboys' success. And he's also at the same time trying to gaslight you into thinking he is Patrick Mahomes. Or he was when he was an option quarterback. I understand. You have to put on a brave face. You have to try and spin it, but the amount of spinning he is doing, he's almost trying to convince himself. Doesn't it sound like he's trying to convince himself? He's bringing up all of these personal experiences and like, I've done this before. So like, yeah, this is going to work. He's trying to convince himself as much as he's trying to convince you. And that is the sign of somebody that is out of ideas and is out of patience. Jerry Jones has no clue where to take this football franchise. He has no idea. He's like, I'm paying Dak Prescott. I'm paying CeeDee Lamb. I'm paying Micah Parsons. I brought in Mike McCarthy. I've, spent all this money on the offensive line. I built, you can't say that Jerry Jones hasn't tried up until this offseason to make the Cowboys better. He's tried. And he's like, I don't know what else to do anymore. So I'm gonna try and pull this weird reverse psychology, you're all you need nonsense to try and get this team to break through and to get to a Super Bowl. But again, it won't work. It won't work. They're not the best team in their division. They're not better than the Niners. They're not better than the Packers. They're not better than the Lions. I'm not saying that I feel bad for the guy, but I can kind of understand where why not try this? How much more of Dak Prescott do you need to see before you realize that this is not a Super Bowl winning quarterback? And look, neither was Dan Marino, neither was Jim Kelly. And both of those guys are far better than Dak Prescott. Not every highly paid quarterback, and it's more true in today's NFL than ever before, not every highly paid quarterback is going to win a Super Bowl. Dak Prescott doesn't look like that. And he's certainly not going to do that if you don't have a running game with him and you don't do anything else to make the team better. But he's at his wit's end. He is out of ideas. He is out of carrots. He is out of sticks. This is the last, I don't know, characterized as a carrot or a stick. You pick, but this is his last motivational tactic. This is his. Actually, in a way, this is him going all in. This is like, this is all I got. I have nothing else. Could be worse, I suppose. Steve G says any other team would be second page news, but it's the Cowgirls. They will continue to be less relevant as time goes on because Jones is a terrible GM in chief. I don't know that I agree with that. I think they're going to continue to be relevant because they're the Cowboys, because they're owned by Jerry Jones. I agree that they're only going to decline from here. I'm with you on that sentiment. But we're always going to talk about the Cowboys. And to be honest, if Jerry Jones is turning out this stuff, I don't talk about the Cowboys beating the Carolina Panthers, but if Jerry Jones is going to sit up there and say the things he said today, I don't care what team he owns. If the Buffalo Bills owner or the New Orleans Saints owner or somebody else came out and said that kind of nonsense, I'd play it. This is not a Cowboys thing necessarily. I'm not fitting them in the rundown because they're the Cowboys. I'm fitting them in because they had the most puzzling offseason of any decent NFL team in the league. And the guy that's in charge is twisting himself into a pretzel trying to make you believe that you should have more hope in his team this year than you have in previous years. But to an extent, I feel for the guy because he did everything he was supposed to do. He paid his quarterback. He paid his wide receiver. It's not like the Cowboys have whiffed on draft picks. Good life lesson for Jerry Jones and everyone else. You can do everything right and still lose. On that happy note, let's talk about your arthritic joint pain. Feels like it's a nice transition here, but unlike the Dallas football team, there is a way out for you from that arthritic joint pain, and it's not surgery, it's not pain pills, it's not steroids. It's QC Kinetics and their exciting new cellular therapies that can get you lasting relief from that arthritic joint pain. They're helping patients like you every day. They've helped tens of thousands of patients across the country, many of them right here in our fair city. Learn how QC Kinetics can treat the pain, enhance your joints, restore your mobility, and give you long-term relief with no downtime. Essentially, what this is accelerating your own body's healing properties, revitalizing your joints so you can move again. The local medical professionals at QC Kinetics are ready to help you get your life back with regenerative, restorative cellular treatments for your achy joints. Call for a free consultation now, 719-347-1988, 719-347-1988. This is the future of medicine. QC Kinetics, 719-347-1988. Hello there. Welcome in Drive Time Sports on a Thursday. Ryan Kaufman is I. Appreciate you tuning in, whether it's on your radio, online, or through the Extra Sports 1300 app, or if you're watching on our many social media platforms at Extra Sports 1300. Day 2 of the Olympics is today. U.S. women's soccer was in action. Get to that in just a little bit, and we'll see if anybody got caught trying to spy on their opponent. Wild first day in Paris. Today, I will tell you a little bit calmer. And then tomorrow night, of course, the big spectacle that is the opening ceremonies. But in the meantime, here are the 3 stories that are driving the show. All right, day 2 of Broncos camp brings us a couple of our stories, including this one. Here's story number 1.
It's good to have him back out here. He provides leadership as well as a skill set that we like.
Broncos coach Sean Payton talking about Courtland Sutton, who will get a raise on his 2024 annual salary as long as he reaches certain incentives. The Broncos sticking $1.5 million in incentives into his contract for 2024. On one hand, it's good to see a guy that was productive get an attaboy, because that's what you want in any workplace. The people that do well should be rewarded for it. And I didn't think it was too much for the Denver Broncos to give him a little bit of a bump. And hey, if you can put it in incentives, even better. But on the other hand, because this adjustment is just this year, there is still the looming question of whether Courtland Sutton is going to be around long term. Sean Payton talked about the size he has in his wide receiver room. If any of them can blend that size with skill to the same degree Courtland Sutton does, then perhaps he won't be on the Denver Broncos too much longer. But right now, out of anybody, he's the most known commodity on this Broncos team. Tim Patrick is coming off of multiple knee surgeries. Marvin Mims is entering his second year after, for the most part, a nondescript rookie year. Troy Franklin is a flat-out rookie. And then you brought in Josh Reynolds as a free agent, and you don't quite know how he's going to fit. You feel pretty good about it, but you have to see. But keeping Courtland Sutton around as long as things didn't get too contentious, it makes all the sense in the world for the Denver Broncos. But in no way, shape, or form does this mean that Courtland Sutton is going to be able to pursue what he said was his goal of being inducted into the Broncos Ring of Fame. Because Sean Payton, as much as last year was about this, and last year was predominantly finding out who he wanted to keep around, specifically at quarterback, and who he didn't want to keep around, some of that is still going on, right? This is kind of the in-between. This is the Broncos starting down a path of a rebuild, but also there are players that are still under evaluation. And whether they fit the long-term plans of the Denver Broncos. I think even Pat Surtain is in this group. Not because he needs to prove anything more in terms of his talent, but do the Broncos want to invest the money they would need to keep Pat Surtain around long term if the more important positions, offensive line, wide receiver / tight end, quarterback, are still not where they want them to be after this season is over. So there's still evaluation going on. There are still holdovers from the previous regime that maybe Sean Payton felt intrigued enough by last season to see another year of it. Some would leave them, and I think Cortland Sutton may fall into this group, would leave them in an even worse position than they were in previously. But that evaluation's still going on. And the Denver Broncos said, we're going to reward you for what you did last year, but we're still not sure if you're going to be a part of this team long term. Let's go to story number 2, also from Broncos camp.
Yeah, it's gonna be real intense. And that's the way you should want it to be. I mean, no days off, like you said right here, compete street. Every day we coming in and competition breed excellently. So I mean, we are gonna just get better from it.
That is the leaner Javonte Williams talking about the running back competition at camp. And if you're looking for how the Denver Broncos improve year 1 under Sean Payton to year 2, I think the run game is one of the first places you need to look. This team was a top 10 team in terms of passing touchdowns. They were a bottom 10 team, bottom 5 team when it came to rushing touchdowns. Their rushing offense was, I believe, 19th in the league. If you're looking for year-over-year improvement, I don't know that you should look at Bo Nix, because while there may be parts of his game that you'll like better than Russell Wilson, like decision-making and getting rid of the football, you have to admit that Russell Wilson did put up some numbers. I'm not sitting here trying to say that the Broncos made a mistake. They absolutely did not. But if you're looking to compare year 1, year 2 statistically, I don't know that you're going to see that growth in the pass game. But I think you'll be able to see it, and you need to see it in the run game. Broncos 19th in the run game. If Javonte Williams is back to where he was before he was hurt, and it's reasonable at his age, 2 years removed from ACL surgery, that he can get close to that and threaten to be, but like threaten in a good way, to be the Broncos' first 1,000-yard rusher in a number of years. And then you throw in a slight tick up for Jaleel McLaughlin, who I don't know that there's much more that he can give, but maybe a little bit more year 1 to year 2. And then you throw in Audric Estime, who Sean Payton gushed about today, to pick up the rest of the slack. It's not crazy to think that the Broncos will go from the 19th best running attack in the NFL to a top 10. They're not going to be the Baltimore Ravens. But if they could be in the top 10, get a little bit better in the red zone by whatever means necessary, then that's when you start to see the Broncos put more points on the board than just the 21 they averaged last year. But I think that's the area where you could potentially see the biggest growth from year 1 to year 2 with Sean Payton is the run game. And Javonte Williams has to be the face of that. He's going to split carries. It's going to be by committee or whatever you want to call what NFL teams do these days. But it's got to start with Javonte Williams. If the Broncos want a 1,000-yard rusher for the first time in a while, it's got to be 33. It's not going to be Jaleel McLaughlin. It's not going to be Audric Estime in his rookie year. Good thing he cut out those taquitos. Not taquitos, Takis. That's what he credited his weight loss to, by the way. Cutting out the Takis. Bad day to be a Takis executive. You've been put on blast. Here is not a Broncos story, not even a football story, but I think a significant one on this Thursday. Here's story number 3.
He's got it, and the ball game is over. Dylan Cease says no hit the Washington Nationals. On a rainy Thursday in D.C., the Padres will celebrate. They have mobbed Cease on the infield, and the Pods sweep the Nats with a 3-0 victory.
KWFN on the call earlier this afternoon. Dylan Cease threw the second no-hitter, second complete game no-hitter of this season. Actually, we haven't had a combined no-hitter this year. Second no-hitter of the year. But the significant part of it is that he did it himself, which is becoming a more rare occurrence by the year. 2021, there were 7 pitchers who went a full 9 innings to get a no-hitter. 7 in 2021. Right now, every year since, including this one, combined, there have been 6. Is pitching getting worse? No. I think pitching is actually getting better. It's the way that teams handle their starting pitchers. The Pirates are an extreme case right now with Paul Skeens, although they did allow him to go over 100 pitches the other night. But it's happening throughout the league. It's not that there are fewer pitchers capable of throwing no-hitters. We've got a lot of really good pitchers. And coincidentally, most of them come through the White Sox system. You notice that? Like, just as a quick aside, shortlist for the NL Cy Young, Reynaldo Lopez, came from the White Sox. Dylan Cease for the Padres came from the White Sox. Lucas Giolito, White Sox. And the guy that will probably be traded by next week, forgetting his name. But if you follow baseball and are following the trade deadline, you know that the White Sox have another pitcher that is highly coveted across the league. Just kind of an interesting thing. Like, could you imagine if the White Sox could get anything else right and keep their rotation intact? How good their rotation would be. But they can't, so it's a moot point. But pitchers just are not being allowed to go further into games. And it's kind of the next wave of thinking in Major League Baseball. Right? And the Rays are the most extreme example with the opener. And now I don't see a ton of teams adopting that. But they're taking what the Rays did and said, you know what? I'd kind of rather have multiple pitchers pitch shorter amount of time and line them up. And the numbers are bearing out that it's working. Scoring is down. Home runs are down. Pitching is starting to take the league back a little bit. But the unintended consequence of all of this is that what Dylan Cease did this afternoon is becoming even more rare than a no-hitter has been throughout baseball history. So we'll never get to the point where there are no complete game no-hitters, but when one pops up, you do want to mention it because maybe a while before you see one again. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. Not quite at my Bo Nix quota yet, so more Bo Nix and quarterback talk, or at least some audio from Sean Payton talking about the quarterback position, and a solid start for U.S. women's soccer in the Colorado trio of Horan, Swanson, and Smith, but maybe even U.S. women's national team in a victory, a resounding victory, maybe left a little bit to be desired. More Drive Time Sports after this. Celebrate Christmas in July with Switchbacks FC tomorrow night, 6 p.m. at Widener Field. The first 2,000 fans through the gates will get a limited edition Switchback scarf powered by KOAA News 5. And then after the Switchbacks take on Las Vegas Lights FC, stick around for a very special Christmas fireworks display tomorrow night, 6 p.m., Widener Field. Get your tickets now at switchbacksfc.com. Speaking of soccer, the U.S. women's national team began their quest for gold this afternoon, taking on Zambia, and it was domination. Pure and utter domination by the part of the Stars and Stripes. Trinity Rodman, who is the daughter of, the Worm, scored the first goal on a new move she calls the Trin Spin. Whatever she wants to call it, it was a fantastic move to score a goal. And then Mallory Swanson scored a brace to make the final scoreline 3-0. In fact, all three of those goals were scored in the first half. Now, for Swanson, as you look at this roster with the three Colorado players, Lindsey Horan, Swanson, and Sophia Smith, I think Mallory Swanson's the most interesting of the bunch because she's been waiting so long to get back to competing at this high of a level. And look, the Olympics aren't the World Cup, but they'll have to do for now, right? She was left off of the Tokyo roster, was injured, and could not compete in the World Cup. So she's been building up some energy to go out there on an international stage and show out in match one right away, first 45 minutes. She nets 2 goals. But a couple of things to look out for moving forward that are slightly less positive. Sophia Smith from the great town of Windsor, Colorado, appeared to injure her ankle during the game. She had to come out. I have not seen any report, but my guess is it's a day-to-day type situation for Sophia Smith. It didn't look too terrible, but maybe her status for the next match, which I believe is Sunday, could be in a little bit of question. So that's something to watch out for. And then I know I'm being kind of a prisoner of what happened in the Copa America, and I should never, ever, ever, ever take anything that happens to the U.S. women's national team and compare it to what happens with the U.S. men's national team, because even though maybe some results for the women on the international stage haven't been as good, it's not fair to them. Right? But I can't help myself. They dominated that match and yet did not score in the second half. Again, this is U.S. women's soccer, which isn't that different than U.S. women's basketball or U.S. men's basketball. There's a different level of expectation. When the U.S. dominates, it should be a greater than a 3-0 scoreline. The significance of this was the same significance that it was for the men in the first match of Copa America, goal differential. If something were to go sideways, you want to bank the goals when you can. Right? And Zambia was the right team to do it against. So, as much as we teach our children, don't run up the score, sportsmanship, when goal differential comes into play, you kind of want to, just in case, right? Save those goals, bank those goals for a rainy day, in case you need a tiebreaker to get out of the group. But I would say for both Sophia Smith's ankle and for the lack of goals in the second half, certainly nothing to panic over at this point, but not things that you wanted to see, given the way that match went and how much better the U.S. was. But Colorado's own Mallory Swanson on the board with a pair of goals in the U.S.'s 3-0 win over Zambia. They'll play again this weekend, as will the men who lost to France. Very important to note, we send our A squad on the women's side, not on the men's side, and that applies across the world. You're not going to see the players that shined on the Euro stage in this tournament. Not allowed. Don't know why. Decision made a long time ago. They've never changed it. This is not amateur soccer players, but it's younger. They use the Olympics as a development. But U.S. men losing 3-0, U.S. women winning 3-0, that tracks. And they'll both play again this weekend in their second match of the group stage. We already have one team within Team USA that is out of medal contention, that being rugby. Yesterday, they got beat up pretty good by Fiji. Today, they were blanked by Australia. But to be fair, both of those countries, they're kind of all about rugby. So not entirely shocking, but disappointing nonetheless. So they are out of medal contention, but can still, have a good, strong, they play a couple more matches. They can maybe finish a little bit higher. Their best finish 6th. And that was in the Tokyo game. So, but already before the opening ceremonies, one part of Team USA out of medal contention. So there's that. It was kind of a boring day 2 of the Olympics, because no one was spying on opponents using a drone and nobody got COVID. That is we're very thankful for that. The last thing we need is to go back to where we were a few years ago, where we were worried about people getting COVID and not being at full strength in these games. So hopefully that doesn't become a thing. And then, and yesterday I didn't even get to what happened with Morocco and Argentina. What was it? 15 minutes of stoppage time, a disallowed goal, Morocco fans storming the field. They had to clear, yesterday was wild. And I was derelict in my duty. I didn't even mention the wildest thing that happened. So yeah, a little bit of a rough start in Paris, but today much more about the competition. And then tomorrow night we will have the opening ceremonies, or tomorrow afternoon, and then it will be replayed at night. Keep you updated. We'll have it covered. Let's get to a couple of texts here. 719-247-1313. Spent a lot of time with Jerry Jones today. A lot of Jerry Jones audio, because it is something. Entertaining, confounding, yes, to both. But he compared how he's handling this upcoming Dallas Cowboys season by not giving anyone extensions and not bringing any new players in, to him playing option quarterback. And then he brought in the name of Patrick Mahomes and in some loose way compared himself to Patrick Mahomes. Basically, he is the Mahomes of team building. That's what Jerry Jones was implying. Albert had a different take, though, saying that Jones is obviously tipping his hand. His plans to sign Tommy Frazier, Jameel Holloway, and possibly even D. Dowis, all at the league minimum, and running his version of the Texas T-Bone offense. That's good. Top marks, Albert. Funny, showed great sports knowledge, and a local tie-in. Good job. Steve G says, here's a crazy thought. Jones sells the Cowboys. That is crazy. That is certifiable. His successor as Cowboys owner is right there. Just like it was with the Hunt family. Same succession plan. Went from Lamar to Clark with the Kansas City Chiefs, and it will go from Jerry to Steven with the Dallas Cowboys. That's not happening. But setting aside this nonsense and him trying, I would like to know what more he could do. I understand this offseason, doing nothing is really weird and is certainly not going to make the Cowboys better. But over his time as owner, this is not Dick Monfort. They hit on Dak Prescott for where they got him in the draft. He's far exceeded expectations. The problem is the expectations are different now, and he's not that guy. If you look at Dak Prescott as the 4th round pick out of Mississippi State, my goodness, the Cowboys have hit on that guy. CeeDee Lamb, one of the elite wide receivers in the NFL. Micah Parsons, one of the best defensive players. What the talent that the Cowboys have brought in, that's what is so confounding about all of this, is that they have talent. But Jerry Jones clearly does not know what's keeping them from winning a Super Bowl. And I have many theories. One of them rhymes with back. But he's taken this as far as it can go. I just don't see how this iteration of the Dallas Cowboys is capable of breaking through. And if you're not breaking through and you're not trending up, then what are you left to do? You're going to just stay where you are? Or you get worse? Like intentionally get worse, if you catch my drift. But I don't think Jerry Jones is willing to do that. I don't think he can stomach it. But that might be what the Dallas Cowboys need. We'll take a break. When we come back, I think in a lot of ways, Antonio Pierce has brought back the Raiders that you know and love. No, wait, not love. Hate. At least I hate them. Tell you what the Raiders pulled today out at their training camp next on Extra Sports 1300. Antonio Pierce is trying to clearly revive the aura of the Raiders of yesteryear. Obviously, first and foremost, he's trying to win out there in Vegas. But he's also trying to kind of do it the way the old Raiders used to do. Trying to be the black hats of the league, trying to be antagonists. Earlier this offseason, he said there would be Mahomes rules with his team, with a nod to the old Jordan rules that Michael Malone's father, Brendan, instituted in Detroit, which is a little bit more nefarious than what they did today. But as a Chiefs fan, no less infuriating. Today, the Las Vegas Raiders had a new addition to training camp in the form of a puppet. And that puppet was Kermit the Frog. How do you think they dressed him up? The Las Vegas Raiders have a Patrick Mahomes Kermit the Frog puppet out at training camp. This may be one of the only times in my life where anything the Raiders would do would amuse Broncos fans. Because I got to imagine if you're a Broncos fan, you get a good kick out of that. And I got to tell you, it's not going to work. Right? It's not going to work. The Chiefs are much better than the Raiders. But I will say, as disrespectful as that is to the soon-to-be 4-time Super Bowl champion quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, I will say I kind of dig what Antonio Pierce is doing. Maybe it's not as gentlemanly as you would like, but hey, you live in a division with one of the greatest football teams ever assembled, led by one day could be considered its greatest quarterback of all time. How are you going to get your team past the mental hurdle of going up against Mahomes? And don't pretend that there isn't a mental hurdle. Ask the Buffalo Bills and Baltimore Ravens about the mental hurdles you have to clear in order to beat Patrick Mahomes. This is not necessarily in good taste, all of this stuff that Antonio Pierce is doing, but I get the idea behind it, and I understand it. I kind of endorse it. Trying to separate myself from my deep offense that I take to this. That's my quarterback. But I like it. Make fun of him. Try to intimidate him. But it's not for Mahomes. Like, he don't care. But it's for his football team. To say we're going to push around Patrick Mahomes a little bit. I don't expect the Raiders to take any cheap shots, although I wouldn't put it past them. But I don't expect that to really be their course of action. But it's just it's psychological for the team. Like, minimize Patrick Mahomes. Don't be awestruck by him. Don't be intimidated by him. Antonio Pierce is trying to inject this feeling of we're not scared of him. And we're going to take it to him in the 2 times we see him this year. It's better than any idea anybody else in that division has had, including the Raiders before they got Antonio Pierce. And hey, if it restores a little bit of the old Raider feeling about these being low-life scumbags, then so be it. I mean, no points for originality. By the way, the Kermit the Frog thing is, it's been around for a while. But you notice that they're going at Patrick Mahomes. Because right now, you have to understand that you are playing with fire if you go at 87. Because you would say, you know what? It's not just Mahomes. It's Kelsey. Right? Because we know they're the Brady and Gronk. Don't go at him. You can't. Go at Patrick Mahomes all you want. Go after Andy Reid. Although you can tread into some territory where it would be in really poor taste. So maybe the Raiders would think better of that. But you better not go at 87. Because he is backed up by an army of independent, strong-willed, and slightly unbalanced women that make up the group affectionately referred to as Swifties. Travis Kelce is a made man in the Taylor Swift community I think that Travis and Taylor will be together forever. Although I do wonder what Taylor Swift is going to sing about if that happens, but can you hear me parsing my words carefully? I'm not stupid. I know I've seen it. The Raiders would be wise. Go after Patrick Mahomes all you want. Better leave Travis Kelce alone. Or else you'll have to delete all your social media. You will not be able to go out in public. And who wants to live that way? So just steer clear of Travis Kelce. Keep your energy focused on Mahomes, and you'll be fine. I like it. First step is between the ears. Right? First step to the Raiders reclaiming this division, to beating the Kansas City Chiefs. And I know they've won some games, but in the end, what does it matter? Like, right? This coincides with them winning that division. It's between the ears. That's the first step. And after my rage subsided and I patched up the holes in the drywall here in the studio, I came to appreciate what the Raiders and Antonio Pierce are trying to do. And hey, anything that gets Chiefs fans motivated to watch the regular season, which has now been rendered completely useless, and because, you know, the Chiefs will do just enough to get in the playoffs and then they'll turn it on and beat everybody. You can give me more incentive to tune in to a Chiefs-Raiders game. I'm all for it. to make that game mean something, to have some juice, all for it. But just, again, I cannot stress this enough. Steer clear of Travis Kelce. You will not like the repercussions of your actions. Before I go, I'm getting a word for QC Kinetics. Great people up there at QC Kinetics. Gone up there, chatted with them, found out what they're all about. I don't have time to go into it all because I would invite you to get a free consultation where they'll lay it out. And also helps when you let them know what's bothering you, where that arthritic joint pain is, your knees, hips, back, shoulder, what you've tried in the past. Maybe it's steroids, maybe it's surgery. Maybe you're timid about doing those things because of the risks. But QC Kinetics offers an alternative. Exciting new cellular therapies that can get you lasting relief. They are the nation's leader in advanced regenerative medicine. These are cutting-edge treatments that accelerate your own body's healing properties, revitalizing your joints so you can move again. Learn how QC Kinetics can treat the pain, enhance your joints, restore your mobility, and give you long-term relief with no downtime. The local medical professionals at QC Kinetics are ready to help you get your life back with regenerative, restorative, cellular treatments for your achy joints. This is the future of medicine. Give them a call for a free consultation. 719-347-1988. 719-347-1988. QC Kinetics. 719-347-1988. It has been my distinct honor and pleasure to serve you. Appreciate the interaction today. One more day left in the week. Another day of Broncos camp. And opening ceremonies for the Olympics. A lot going on tomorrow. Hope you join me at 3. Have a good night.